So before your conscious mind even forms the thought to like lift your hand, an MRI scanner can actually already detect the motor signals firing in your brain to move it.
Which is just wild.
It's completely mind-bending.
Yeah.
You do not make decisions the way you think you do. You act on subconscious habit, and then your brain just kind of scrambles to invent a rationalization for why you just did it.
Right. It completely inverts the whole classical model of human agency, you know?
Yeah, exactly. We have this comforting assumption that we're the rational captains of our own ship.
We really do.
Like, you encounter a situation, your conscious mind evaluates the data, you formulate a choice, and you execute. But clinical neuroscience tells a completely different story.
Yeah, the readiness due to that electrical buildup in the motor cortex, it happens hundreds of milliseconds before you're ever actually aware of your intent to move.
So our vaunted rationality, right, the thing we use to distinguish ourselves from animals, it's frequently just a post hoc storyteller. It's like a PR department working overtime to draft press releases explaining the actions our body has already taken.
That's a great way to put it. The prefrontal cortex is incredibly skilled at crafting these narratives that make our automatic, usually fear-based reactions look like carefully calculated logic.
Wow.
So by the time you consciously decide, and I'm using air quotes there, to procrastinate on a project or avoid a difficult conversation, your nervous system has already routed you away from the discomfort.
Unbelievable.
And the reason you give yourself is just cosmetic packaging.
And that neurological reality is basically the perfect entry point for today's deep dives.
Definitely.
Because we are targeting that painfully universal gap between wishing and doing, between having a brilliant idea and actually executing it.
Which so many people struggle with.
Oh, absolutely. So to bridge this gap, we're unpacking the life's work of Bernard Roth. He's a 52-year Stanford engineering professor and one of the core founders of the legendary D-School, you know, the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design.
Right. And we're specifically analyzing the frameworks he laid out in his book, The Achievement Habit.
Yes.
And it is so vital to frame this properly for you listening right now. This is not standard motivational literature.
No, not at all.
Roth doesn't care about positive affirmations or, chanting in a mirror.
Yeah, he's an engineer.
Exactly. He approaches personal development through the lens of a highly rigorous design engineer. He takes design thinking, which is a methodology typically used to engineer better microchips or streamline hospital supply chains, and he applies it to human behavioral bottlenecks.
He looks at your personal roadblocks, your career stagnation, your failed habits, as literal engineering problems waiting to be hacked.
It's a completely different paradigm.
It really is. The premise is that true achievement is not some innate genetic gift. It's a mechanical muscle. And today, we're going to look at the exact physics of how to flex it.
I love that.
Because, okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Roth argues that highly intelligent people, the kind of people who might be listening right now, maybe coasting at a tech giant, daydreaming about a startup, they never launch.
Yeah.
They fail because they fundamentally misunderstand the physical mechanics of action.
Yeah, they do.
He draws this harsh, unyielding line between the concept of trying and the concept of doing.
And he demonstrates this distinction in his classes using a very physical, somewhat confrontational experiment.
Oh, the water bottle thing.
Yes, the water bottle experiment. So he asks a student volunteer to stand at the front of the lecture hall. Roth takes a plastic water bottle, grips it firmly in his hand, and issues a really specific instruction to the student. He says, please try to take this away from me.
Right, he says, try.
Exactly. And the students usually start off pretty tentative, but when they realize this older professor has a death grip on the plastic, they escalate.
They get into it.
Yeah, they plant their feet, they grit their teeth, they start wrestling with him, exerting a tremendous amount of muscular force. I mean, their knuckles turn white.
But they don't get the bottle.
No, it just turns into an awkward, static tug of war.
Because the instruction was to try.
Precisely. After a minute of this struggle, Roth stops them. He resets the scenario with a completely new psychological framing.
Okay.
He tells the student to imagine that he, the professor, is actually the student's deeply annoying younger sibling. And there are no parents around to referee. The situation is intolerable, and it's time to reclaim the property.
So what's the new instruction?
The new instruction is binary. He says, take the bottle from me, not try to take it, just take it.
And the shift in the physical outcome is instantaneous.
Completely instantaneous?
The student doesn't wrestle, they don't plant their feet and pull, they simply whisk the object out of his hand before his brain can even process the resistance.
It is a total shift in physics. Mechanically, what we are observing is the transition from force to power.
Force to power. Break that down for us.
Okay, so when the student is trying, they are utilizing static force, asymmetric contraction. It's an immense output of physical energy that meets direct counter-resistance.
Meaning they're working really hard but going nowhere?
Exactly. Zero actual displacement. They're burning fuel just to stay in the exact same place.
Right.
But when the instruction shifts to doing, the student accesses power. Power is dynamic. It does not meet resistance head-on. It utilizes speed, timing, and an unbroken psychological intention to bypass the resistance entirely.
So trying is like sitting in your driveway, putting your car in drive, and stomping on the gas pedal while the emergency brake is fully engaged.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
You hear the engine roaring, you're burning a massive amount of fuel, there's smoke coming off the tires, and if anyone looks at you, they'll say, wow, they are really working hard.
But the car isn't moving.
Exactly. Doing isn't about pressing the gas harder. It's about calmly reaching down and releasing the brake.
That tracks the psychological mechanism perfectly. When you say, I'm going to try to write a novel, or I'm going to try to learn a new coding language,
You're engaging the brake.
you are actively engaging the emergency brake. You are baking the high probability of failure into your baseline intention.
Because trying implies you might not succeed.
Right. You are signaling to your nervous system that failure is a socially and personally acceptable outcome. It provides a built-in escape hatch, so your brain doesn't allocate total focus.
And doing removes the hatch.
Yes. Doing removes the escape hatch entirely. The attention becomes singular.
Okay, but I want to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Because it risks sounding a bit like, The Secret, where if you just intend hard enough, the universe magically yields.
Right, just manifest it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But what about actual physical, immovable barriers?
Mm-hmm.
We aren't always just fighting our own internal procrastination. Sometimes there is a literal brick wall in front of the car.
That's a fair point. The framework does not deny the existence of external obstacles, but it argues that our classification of those obstacles as immovable brick walls is almost always a cognitive distortion.
Okay, how so?
Well, the barrier is rarely the physical object or situation itself. The barrier is our rigid interpretation of it. We look at a locked door and determine we are trapped.
While completely ignoring the open window next to it.
Exactly. Because in our heads, windows are for looking out of, not for exiting.
Right. And this maps directly onto the Pirates and Powdered Milk case study from the text.
Yeah.
Which is just an incredible story.
It really is.
Because this is a story where the external obstacle was not a metaphor. It was a group of armed men.
Yeah, let's break down the mechanics of that encounter because it is the ultimate stress test of power over force.
Set the scene for us.
So Roth was interviewing a woman who recounted a sailing trip with her boyfriend off the coast of Indonesia.
Okay.
She is alone on the anchored boat while her boyfriend is in town, and a group of heavily armed pirates board the vessel.
Just horrifying.
Right. They level weapons at her and demand cash, but she has no cash on board.
So if we look at the neurobiology of that exact second, her amygdala is flooded.
Completely flooded. The limbic system is screaming for a fight-or-flight response. Her heart rate spikes, blood rushes to her major muscle groups.
And her prefrontal cortex, the center of logic and creative problem solving, is essentially suffocated.
Right, because the brain prioritizes immediate survival instincts. Now, if she yields to that limbic hijack, she utilizes force.
Meaning she either tries to fight armed men, which is force against superior force resulting in death.
Yeah, or she panics and screams, escalating their limbic response, which likely results in the same outcome.
But she doesn't do that.
No. She executes a cognitive override. She forces blood flow back to her prefrontal cortex by shifting her perspective from her own terror to their underlying motivations.
Okay.
She realizes they are demanding money to acquire resources, so she bypasses the demand for cash and looks at what resources she actually possesses.
And she realizes she has a massive stockpile of powdered milk on the boat.
Yes. And she deduces that in this remote region, powdered milk is a highly valuable commodity.
Specifically for families with infants.
Exactly. So she executes an absolute masterclass in reframing the environment. She doesn't fight them. She completely abandons the context of an armed robbery.
Wow.
She calmly speaks to them, explaining the lack of cash, but offers the powdered milk, explicitly appealing to their identities as parents who need to feed their children.
She shifts the dynamic from predator and prey to a barter system between equals.
And their aggressive posture immediately dissolves. They accept the milk with genuine gratitude, leave the boat completely unharmed.
And Roth hires her on the spot.
Because she proved that even a loaded gun isn't an immovable brick wall if you refuse to engage it with static force.
Man, if a person can negotiate their way out of a maritime hostage situation using baby formula, it really demands that we look at our own so-called insurmountable career roadblocks and ask some uncomfortable questions.
Very uncomfortable question.
Like, are you really trapped by your lack of funding, or your difficult boss, or your geography?
Or are you just refusing to release the emergency brake because the struggle feels safe?
And the struggle definitely feels safe.
It does. Which leads us to the inevitable next question. If dynamic action doing is so vastly superior and less exhausting than trying, why do we spend the majority of our adult lives stuck in the trying phase?
And Roth's diagnosis here is brutal. He states that we are completely addicted to our good reasons.
Good reasons, meaning our excuses.
Yes. The concept of reasons in this methodology is highly confrontational. Roth defines reasons, even entirely factual ones, as nothing more than excuses with a good public relations team.
He essentially calls them socially acceptable bullshit.
That's exactly what they are. And to understand why we rely on them, we have to look at the evolutionary biology of social cohesion.
Okay, lay it on us.
If you behave erratically without explanation, society views you as a threat. If you walk up to a stranger in a cafe, knock their coffee onto the floor, and walk away in silence, you will likely face police intervention, right? Because you seem dangerous.
But if you quickly say, "Oh my gosh, I thought there was a wasp on your cup," the tension immediately de-escalates.
The action is the same, but the reason contextualizes it.
Exactly. Reasons are the lubricating oil of social friction. We need them to survive in groups.
But the danger is that we internalize this external survival mechanism. We start using reasons not just to pacify the group, but to pacify our own cognitive dissonance.
Yes. We use them to dodge taking 100% responsibility for our reality. It relies heavily on the false cause fallacy, cum hoc ergo propter hoc.
With this, therefore because of this.
Right. We naturally correlate two simultaneous events and assume one caused the other, simply because it absolves us of failure.
The book uses that classic Times Square joke to illustrate this fallacy, which I love.
Oh, it's perfect.
Right, so a man is standing in the middle of Times Square, furiously snapping his fingers every 2 seconds. A police officer walks up and asks, "What are you doing?"
And the guy says, "I'm keeping the wild tigers away."
The officer looks around and says, "There isn't a wild tiger within 1,000 miles of New York City." And the man smiles triumphantly and says,
"See? My snapping is incredibly effective."
"It's hilarious, but we do the exact same thing with our professional and personal stagnation."
We really do.
You fail to launch your freelance business and you point to the high interest rates in the broader economy. You are snapping your fingers and declaring the economy is the sole causal mechanism for your inaction.
And it sounds perfectly rational to your peers, right? But it is a fundamental misattribution of cause.
So much so that the culture at the Stanford D School actually institutionalized a way to combat this.
Yeah, this is a great practice.
If a faculty member or a student is in a design review and they start defending a failed prototype by saying, "Well, I couldn't get the stress testing done because the engineering lab lost our requisition form," the rest of the room is trained to immediately interrupt them.
The entire room will break into a sarcastic theatrical chorus singing, "That's a good reason."
It's designed to be slightly humiliating.
It is, because it serves as a pattern interrupt. It forces the speaker out of their victim narrative. By mocking the excuse, the group forces the individual to acknowledge that the lost requisition form is not the actual root cause of the prototype's failure.
Okay, wait, I needed to jump in here.
Go for it.
Because this is where the listener is going to violently disagree. And honestly, I kind of do too.
I get it.
If a lab physically loses your paperwork, how is that not the cause of the delay? Are we supposed to live in some fantasy world where external systems don't impact us?
No, not at all.
What if I'm driving to a vital career-making meeting and I hit a patch of black ice and my car spins into a ditch? The car is totaled. Is the black ice just an excuse?
Yeah.
Am I supposed to tell my boss, "Sorry, getting to this meeting just wasn't a high enough priority for me"?
That is the exact friction this philosophy aims to generate. Let's look at the underlying mathematics of priority that Roth uses to answer this exact pushback.
Okay, convince me.
He shares a personal case study about a corporate board he served on in Berkeley, California. The commute from his home required taking Highway 880, which is notoriously congested.
Right.
For months, Roth was consistently late to these board meetings. He would walk in 20 minutes after the start time, profusely apologizing, citing the horrific gridlock on 880.
And the traffic was a verifiable fact. He wasn't lying about the congestion.
The reason was 100% factually accurate. But factual accuracy does not equal root causality.
Okay.
Roth eventually experienced a moment of uncomfortable self-awareness. He looked around the boardroom table at his fellow directors. They lived in the same region. They had to commute on the exact same Highway 880. They navigated the exact same gridlock.
But they were there.
Yet, they were sitting in their chairs when the gavel fell. Why?
Because they ran a different subconscious calculation on the value of the meeting.
Precisely. Roth analyzed his own behavior prior to getting in the car. He realized that because he subconsciously didn't value the board meeting very highly, he would inevitably find ways to delay his departure.
Oh, totally.
He would answer one more email, make one more cup of coffee, chat with a colleague in the hallway. He allocated zero buffer time for the inevitable friction of the highway.
So his lateness was not inflicted upon him by the State Transportation Department.
No, it was a mathematical output of his own internal priority ranking.
He literally didn't care enough to leave early.
Exactly. And once he stripped away the good reason of traffic and confronted his own lack of prioritization, his behavior changed. He acknowledged the meeting needed to be a priority, he built in the buffer, and he was never late again.
The highway didn't change, his agency did.
Exactly. And he applies the same ruthless logic to his students at Stanford. A student walks in late and says, "Professor, I'm sorry, I have a flat tire on my bicycle."
And Roth asks him a hypothetical question, right?
Yeah, he says, "If the established penalty for walking into my classroom 1 minute late was your immediate permanent expulsion from Stanford University, would you have been late today?"
And the answer is always no. If the stakes were that high, the student would have set 3 alarms. They would have checked the tire pressure the night before. If the tire was flat, they would have abandoned the bike and sprinted across campus. They would have crawled to the building to avoid expulsion.
Therefore, the flat tire is a reality, but it is not the reason for the tardiness. The reason is that attending the lecture on time did not cross the threshold of priority required to engineer a failsafe.
So how do we operationalize this? Like if you are listening to this on your commute or sitting at your desk, what is your Highway 880 excuse right now?
That's the million-dollar question.
What is the perfectly rational, socially acceptable reason you were giving your friends for why your screenplay isn't finished or why you haven't applied for the promotion?
Right, and the operational protocol here is dual-layered. Roth does not expect you to become an antisocial truth-teller who alienates everyone.
Right, you don't have to be a jerk.
Exactly. Externally, you continue to use reasons because society requires that lubrication. If you miss a dinner party, you blame a sudden work emergency, not the fact that you decided watching television was a higher priority than their company. You preserve the social fabric.
But internally?
Internally, you enact an absolute embargo on believing your own press releases. When you look in the mirror, you hold yourself to radical accountability. You admit, I didn't launch the business this year because I prioritized the comfort of my salary over the risk of failure.
Ouch. Okay, so we strip away the illusion of trying, and we ruthlessly discard our good reasons. We stop blaming the black ice and the lost paperwork. We take ownership.
Yes.
But that introduces a terrifying new vulnerability. You are now standing there naked with your problem, and you might still be completely stuck. You don't have an excuse to hide behind, but you also don't have a solution.
And this is where we transition from behavioral psychology into pure design thinking. When you take total ownership of a problem but cannot find a solution, the failure is rarely a lack of intelligence or effort.
What is it then?
The failure almost always stems from the fact that you are expending immense energy trying to solve the completely wrong problem.
We're blind to the actual problem because of how our brains categorize reality.
Psychologists refer to this cognitive heuristic as functional fixedness.
Functional fixedness.
Basically, to save metabolic energy, the human brain rapidly categorizes objects and situations based on their most common historical utility.
Make that real for us.
Okay, if I place a cardboard box of Cheerios on a table and instruct you to construct a waterproof communication device, your brain immediately flags the box as breakfast food container. It fixes the function. You stare at it and feel stuck.
But if you force the brain out of that heuristic, if you change your point of view, your POV, The object dissolves into raw materials.
Exactly. It ceases to be a cereal box. It becomes 50 grams of structural cardboard, 2 square feet of moisture-resistant wax paper, and a pile of edible biomass that can be used as an adhesive paste.
Unbelievable. By breaking functional fixedness, you unlock an entirely new solution space.
Without doing this, we engage in behavior perfectly encapsulated by the parable of the drunk man and the lamppost.
Oh, this visual is so painfully relatable.
It's a classic.
Right, so a heavily intoxicated man is walking down a sidewalk. He bumps face first into a metal lamppost. He stumbles back, mutters to himself, takes a step forward, and bumps into the exact same lamppost.
Over and over.
He does this 6 or 7 times, repeatedly bruising his forehead against the same steel pole. Finally, he collapses on the curb, puts his head in his hands, and sobs. It's no use. They have me completely surrounded.
It's absurd, but it mirrors exactly how analytical professionals approach career and relationship bottlenecks.
Totally.
We obsess over a highly specific, narrow solution, and we mistake that solution for the problem itself. We keep bouncing off the same rigid lamppost, exhausting ourselves, convinced we are trapped by insurmountable circumstances, when all we need to do is take one single lateral step and walk around it.
The story of Krishna's bed is the ultimate proof of this lateral step.
Yeah.
Walk us through how Krishna was bouncing off the lamppost.
So Krishna was a Stanford student in one of Roth's design seminars. The assignment was to identify a personal problem and engineer a solution.
Okay.
Krishna chose to focus on his broken bed frame, which was sagging severely and ruining his sleep. For the first several weeks of the term, Krishna reported 0 progress. His updates were just a litany of mechanical frustrations.
Like what?
He couldn't source the correct gauge of replacement wire. When he found the wire, he didn't have the specialized tensioning tool to install it. He was trapped in a supply chain nightmare.
So his problem statement was rigidly locked. How do I procure the materials to fix this specific metallic bed frame? That was his lamppost.
Exactly. And Roth, utilizing the pressure cooker environment of the D School, essentially threatened to fail him if he didn't present a solution immediately.
A little tough love.
Yep. And the following week, Krishna walked into the seminar completely relaxed and announced the problem was permanently solved.
And when Roth asked how he finally managed to source the specialized wire,
Krishna replied that he didn't. He just threw the frame away and bought a new bed.
it sounds almost insultingly simple, like a punchline.
But structurally, it requires a cognitive leap that most people never make.
Yeah?
It requires utilizing what Roth calls the abstraction ladder.
The abstraction ladder.
When you are stuck on a specific problem statement, you must step one rung up the ladder by asking a very specific diagnostic question. What would it actually do for me if I solved this?
Okay, so if Krishna asks, what would it do for me if I fix this wire? The answer is the mattress would be flat. If he steps up again and asks, what would it do for me if the mattress was flat? The answer is, I would get a good night's sleep.
And right there, the fundamental problem statement shifts. He is no longer solving the engineering problem of how do I fix a bed frame. He is solving the human problem of how do I achieve a good night's sleep.
The solution space instantly expands.
Buying a new bed, sleeping on the floor, or moving to a different dorm all solve a newly defined problem without ever requiring the missing wire.
And the book applies this exact abstraction ladder to the anxiety of modern dating, too.
Oh, yeah, that's a brilliant example.
Someone might articulate their problem as, how do I find a spouse?
Mm-hmm.
And they spend years miserably swiping on apps, bouncing off the lamppost of finding a perfect romantic partner.
But if they ask, what would it do for me if I found a spouse? The honest answer might be, I would have steady companionship and someone to share meals with.
At which point, the problem statement reframes to, how do I find steady companionship?
Which you can solve through community organizations, deepening existing friendships, or even adopting a pet. You bypass the immense friction of the original, rigidly defined problem.
Now, this reframing isn't just a clever trick for college dorms and dating apps.
Yeah.
When you apply this methodology at scale, it is literally a matter of life and death.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the source material highlights this with the Embrace Incubator project, which is just a masterclass in shifting the POV. Let's get into that.
The Embrace project originated when a team of Stanford design students were tasked with addressing a horrifying global health statistic: the massive rate of premature infant mortality in developing nations, specifically Nepal.
And the standard medical equipment, the hospital incubator, costs upwards of $20,000.
Right. They are highly complex machines that require a continuous, stable supply of electricity and expensive replacement parts.
So the students initially locked on to the obvious engineering problem. Their lamppost was, how do we manufacture a cheaper, more robust hospital incubator?
And they spent months trying to value engineer the machine, trying to strip out costs and make the electronics more durable.
But before finalizing their prototypes, they traveled to Nepal for field research.
And what they discovered completely shattered their initial problem statement. They visited hospitals in the urban centers and found that they actually had functioning incubators.
Wait, really?
Yeah, but the machines were frequently empty. The crisis was not happening in the cities. The babies were dying in remote, high-altitude mountain villages because the mothers could not keep them warm during the days-long trek down to the urban hospitals.
Oh, wow. So an incubator that cost $200 instead of $20,000 wouldn't save a single life if the baby died on the mountain before reaching it.
Exactly. The students were solving for the wrong variable. They realized they were suffering from functional fixedness regarding the concept of medical care.
So they stepped up the abstraction ladder.
Yes. They stopped asking, how do we fix the hospital incubator? And asked, what is the fundamental biological function of the incubator?
The answer being, it regulates the infant's core body temperature.
So the new problem statement becomes radically simplified. How do we keep a premature baby at precisely 98 degrees Fahrenheit in a remote Himalayan village with zero access to electricity?
And this shift in POV led to an entirely different class of solution. They abandoned electronics entirely.
They engineered a miniature, portable sleeping bag containing a specialized pouch.
And inside the pouch is a phase change wax material. A mother in a remote village simply boils water over a wood fire, melts the wax, and slips the pouch into the sleeping bag.
The thermodynamic properties of the wax allow it to radiate a perfectly steady, life-saving heat for over 4 hours.
It requires no electricity, it is completely portable,
Yeah.
and most importantly, it reduced the cost from $20,000 to roughly $25.
Less than 1% of the cost of the original machine.
And that specific reframing of the problem has gone on to save the lives of hundreds of thousands of infants across the globe, all because they stopped trying to fix the bed frame.
It's incredible. And there is another clinical design case study in the sources that demonstrates how reframing can solve not just logistical problems, but deep emotional and psychological trauma.
Right, the story of Doug Dietz and the General Electric MRI scanner.
Yes. This perfectly illustrates how the same physical space can be experienced as a torture chamber or a playground, depending entirely on the narrative design.
Walk us through what Doug did.
Doug Dietz was a highly accomplished industrial designer at GE. He spent over 2 years engineering a state-of-the-art MRI machine. From a technological standpoint, it was a masterpiece. Better imaging, stronger magnets.
But when he finally visited a pediatric hospital to observe his machine in clinical use, he experienced a profound crisis of conscience.
Because he saw what the machine actually felt like to a 6-year-old child.
Right. An MRI bore is a claustrophobic, dimly lit tunnel. The magnetic coils generate a horrific, mechanical clanging sound that frequently exceeds 120 decibels.
Which is equivalent to standing next to a jet engine. Dietz watched a terrified child weeping as they were strapped to the table. And the clinical reality he uncovered was staggering. Nearly 85% of pediatric patients were so traumatized by the environment that they had to be heavily sedated with anesthetics just to prevent them from moving and ruining the scan.
Now, a traditional engineer would view this as a hardware problem. How do we dampen the acoustics of the magnet? How do we widen the bore aperture?
But redesigning the core hardware of a multi-million-dollar medical device would take a decade of R&D and billions of dollars. That's the lamppost.
So Dietz stepped off the lamppost. He reframed the problem by adopting the POV of the terrified child.
The problem wasn't the acoustic frequency of the magnet. The problem was the cognitive reality of fear. His new problem statement became, how do we cognitively transform a terrifying medical procedure into an engaging, thrilling adventure?
And what he did is just breathtaking, because he solved the problem without changing a single line of software or a single piece of hardware.
He used storytelling.
He hired painters to transform the sterile MRI suite into a highly immersive environment. He created the pirate adventure, where the machine was painted like a galleon. He created the space station.
He trained the medical technicians to act as ship captains or mission control. They would tell the pediatric patients that they were about to enter a spaceship, and the horrific clanging noise they were going to hear was just the hyperdrive engines engaging.
To survive the jump to light speed, the child had to hold perfectly, completely still.
They hijacked the child's natural inclination for play and used it to override their fear response.
And the results were instantaneous. The sedation rate plummeted from 85% to nearly zero.
The hospital was able to scan more patients in a day, saving massive amounts of money on anesthesiology. And most profoundly, children were actually asking their parents if they could come back and go on the spaceship again.
By redefining the problem from noise reduction to fear reduction, Dietz manipulated the cognitive reality of the patients, solving a billion-dollar engineering hurdle with a few buckets of paint and a compelling narrative.
It's a perfect example of what design thinking can actually achieve.
Okay, so if you are listening to this and you are staring at a seemingly impossible situation at work or in a relationship, you have to run this diagnostic on yourself. Are you agonizing over how to build a quieter magnet when you really just need to paint the room?
Are you obsessing over the missing wire when you just need to sleep?
Step up the abstraction ladder. But this creates a new, very specific danger. Once you reframe the problem and unlock all these new out-of-the-box solutions, you actually have to pick one.
You have to make a choice.
And for the highly analytical minds listening, having 20 options doesn't look like freedom.
Whoa.
It looks like a complex math equation waiting to be optimized.
Which brings us face to face with the cognitive trap of decision paralysis.
The absolute worst.
When intelligent people are presented with multiple viable paths, their prefrontal cortex attempts to guarantee success by calculating the optimal route. This leads to a state perfectly captured by the philosophical paradox of Buridan's ass.
Named after the 14th century French philosopher Jean Buridan. It's a tragic-comic thought experiment.
The paradox imagines a perfectly rational donkey placed precisely equidistant between a pile of high-quality hay and a bucket of fresh water.
Okay.
The donkey is equally hungry and thirsty. Because the animal is perfectly rational, it attempts to calculate a logical, mathematically superior reason to choose the hay over the water, or vice versa.
But because the options are perfectly balanced, the algorithm cannot compute a winner.
The donkey is paralyzed by the lack of an objectively superior choice. So it just stands there, calculating and recalculating, until it literally drops dead of starvation.
We do this constantly in our professional lives.
Mm-hmm.
We are caught between two job offers, or deciding whether to stay in a relationship or leave, or choosing between two cities.
Instead of acting, we freeze. We build massive weighted decision matrices in Excel. We score every variable: commute time, salary, cost of living, weather on a scale of 1 to 10.
We apply complex weightings, desperately hoping the math will relieve us of the burden of making a choice.
But Reith argues that these hyper-rational spreadsheets are actually a subconscious scam. We aren't doing math. We are performing a ritual to appease our anxiety.
It is a self-deception mechanism.
Yeah.
The source material references an engineer named Kumar who took this to the absolute extreme.
Yes, Kumar.
Kumar constructed a rigorous, multi-page weighted matrix to evaluate 6 potential women his family had suggested for an arranged marriage.
Wow.
He scored them on dozens of attributes, applying complex formulas to determine his ideal life partner.
But when you actually analyze the math in these matrices, the fix is always in.
Always.
What psychologists find when they study these matrices is that the subconscious mind simply manipulates the subjective weightings of the criteria to ensure that the final mathematical output aligns perfectly with the intuitive gut-level choice the person had already made on day one.
So if your gut wants option B, you will subconsciously heavily weight the specific variables where option B excels, just to make the math validate your intuition.
It's the Times Square tiger all over again. We know what we want, but we need a good reason to justify it to society, so we dress our intuition up in a spreadsheet.
The rational math is just a bodyguard for the limbic system's preference.
Because the D school recognizes that the prefrontal cortex is often just running interference, they preach a core philosophy, a bias toward action.
Don't stand between the hay and the water optimizing the distance. Just pick one and start chewing.
Action generates real-world feedback. Optimization just generates anxiety.
Roth has a terrifyingly effective pedagogical tool for forcing this bias toward action. He uses it when a student comes to him completely paralyzed by a massive life decision, agonizing for months over whether to drop out, change majors, or take a specific job.
Oh, the gun test.
Yes, Roth will look at them, suddenly point his fingers directly at their forehead like a gun, and shout, "You have exactly 15 seconds to decide, or I pull the trigger. What is your decision?"
It is a shock tactic designed to bypass the analytical processing centers. The sudden, intense, artificial pressure completely short-circuits the prefrontal cortex's ability to build a matrix.
The brain is forced to access the deeper intuitive layers the basal ganglia.
And the remarkable result is that the students almost always blurt out the answer instantly.
They don't need more data. They already know exactly what they want to do. They are just terrified of the responsibility of claiming it without a spreadsheet to blame if it goes wrong.
And if the student still attempts to intellectualize their paralysis, Roth deploys what he calls the life's journey method.
It is a teleological exercise that is simultaneously hilarious and profoundly bleak.
A student will say, I'm terrified that if I choose this internship over the other one, it will ruin my trajectory. And Roth will ask, okay, let's play it out. If you take the internship, then what happens?
The student says, then I get a good job.
Roth asks, great, then what?
Then I get promoted and buy a house.
Right, then what?
I guess I get married and have kids.
Great, then what?
Well, eventually I retire and get old.
Great, then what?
Then I die.
It's the ultimate equalizer. It forces the realization that the end game of every single path you could possibly choose is identical. The destination is fixed.
Therefore, the immense anxiety over selecting the perfect sequence of steps is largely an illusion. There is no objectively optimal path that prevents you from reaching the end.
The only true error is standing paralyzed like Buridan's ass, failing to experience the journey because you're too busy calculating the route.
The methodology is simple. Act, gather data from the outcome, and iterate.
Act, fail, and iterate.
But let's pause on that middle word. Fail. That is the word that triggers the paralysis in the first place. We are deeply socially conditioned from childhood to view failure as a permanent stain on our identity. You get an F on a test, you hide it.
Our physiological response to failure is identical to a physical threat. When we make a mistake publicly, the brain triggers a cortisol spike. We experience shame, which prompts physical withdrawal.
Our shoulders slump, we avert our eyes, we attempt to minimize our physical presence to avoid further social scrutiny. It is an ancient survival mechanism.
But at the Stanford Design School, they actively hack this neurological response. They use somatic feedback to rewire the brain's relationship with failure, and they do it using the circus clown bow.
Tell me about this.
Roth and his colleagues, notably a professor named Rolf Fest, integrated this physical practice into their core curriculum. They observed how jugglers in a circus react when they drop a pin.
A master juggler does not look down, mumble an apology to the audience, and slink off the stage in shame.
They do the exact opposite. They throw their hands high into the air, puff out their chest, strike a triumphant, joyous pose, and yell, "Ta-da!" at the top of their lungs.
When Stanford students mess up a prototype or give a bad presentation, they are required to physically execute this ta-da motion.
It sounds absurd, but the neurobiology behind it is bulletproof. The brain takes cues from the body's posture. By physically forcing your arms into a posture of victory and vocalizing energy, you are short-circuiting the shame spiral.
You are feeding the nervous system data that interprets the error not as a social threat, but as an intentional, energetic release. It completely reframes failure from a character flaw into a neutral, even positive data collection event.
It separates your identity from the outcome, which perfectly sets up the story of Mike and the Serpent Mother at Burning Man.
This is arguably the most powerful narrative in the entire source material regarding the fluid, constructed meeting of success and failure.
It is a profound demonstration of how a single data point can be misinterpreted if viewed statically rather than dynamically.
So, Mike is a graduate student in Roth's design class. For his final term project, Mike pitches an incredibly ambitious idea. He wants to build a wearable, steam-powered pipe organ to showcase at the Burning Man Festival.
Roth is skeptical but approves it.
But as the term progresses, Mike completely drops the ball. He procrastinates, he misses check-ins, and he is clearly overwhelmed by the engineering requirements.
He fails to execute the doing.
When they finally meet at Burning Man to test the prototype in the desert, it is a catastrophic failure. The instrument barely functions, steam is leaking, it's a mess.
Mike is deeply humiliated. Roth is embarrassed for him. And in that moment, Roth privately assigns a permanent label to Mike. He writes him off in his mind as a slacker, a complete and utter failure.
Roth engaged in the exact cognitive distortion we discussed. He took a temporary outcome and rigidly defined it as a permanent identity.
Exactly. Fast forward 3 years, Roth is back at Burning Man. He is walking across the playa at night, and he is stopped dead in his tracks by one of the most awe-inspiring kinetic art installations he has ever seen.
It's called the Serpent Mother.
It is a 168-foot-long, articulated metallic skeleton of a snake. It has hydraulic jaws that snap open and closed, and it is lined with 41 propane flamethrowers that shoot synchronized pillars of fire 20 feet into the night sky.
It is a breathtaking feat of complex mechanical engineering, robotics, fluid dynamics, and pyrotechnics.
Roth is absolutely transfixed. He walks over to the central control station, which is this massive array of levers and buttons, to ask the crew how they engineered the hydraulic joints.
The crew member points to the guy operating the main console and says, "I don't know, ask the guy holding the controller." Roth looks over.
It's Mike, the slacker.
Yes. Mike is the mastermind operating the most complex, celebrated robotic sculpture at the entire festival.
They embrace, and months later, Mike writes an email to Roth asking, "Did I redeem myself?"
And Roth realizes how fundamentally flawed his initial judgment was. Mike didn't let that first failed steam organ define him. He didn't hide in shame.
He metaphorically yelled, "Ta-da!" Took the engineering lessons he learned from that failure and iterated.
The central axiom to extract from Mike's journey is that you are the sole author of meaning in your life. The events themselves, the broken steam organ, the failed startup, the divorced marriage, are completely neutral data points.
The meaning of the event is entirely constructed by the narrative you layer over it. If you allow the failure to be the final punctuation mark, it is a failure.
If you use it as the prototype for the serpent mother, then that initial failure was actually the indispensable first step of a massive success.
If we are the authors of our own meaning, then the instrument we use to write that narrative is language. And Roth dedicates a significant portion of his framework to the microlinguistics of self-sabotage.
He argues that the literal vocabulary escaping our mouths continuously rebuilds the psychological cages we are trying to escape.
This aligns with principles of cognitive behavioral therapy and even a micro-application of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which suggests that the structure of a language shapes the speaker's perception of reality.
The words you choose do not merely reflect your internal state, they actively construct it. By swapping out a few key structural words, you can literally reprogram how your brain processes friction.
Let's start with the most common syntax error we make: the use of the word but versus the word and.
This is a foundational principle borrowed from improvisational theater. When you insert the word but into a sentence, you operate as a cognitive roadblock.
But introduces a false binary conflict. If you say, "I really want to go to the movies tonight, but have a huge report to finish for work," you have just created a mutually exclusive win-lose scenario.
You've built a wall.
You've created a good reason to fail at one of the objectives. Your brain perceives an impassable conflict and shuts down creative problem solving.
However, if you apply a semantic patch and swap that single word to, "and I really want to go to the movies tonight and I have a huge report to finish," the structural reality of the sentence changes.
And functions like a Boolean operator that expands the search parameters.
Exactly. Existentially, both facts are simultaneously true. You want to see the film, and the report is due. They are not enemies.
By using "and," you force the brain into a state of cognitive accommodation. You start asking, how do we satisfy both conditions?
Can I write the report for 2 hours, go to the late showing, and finish the rest in the morning? Can I draft the outline on my phone in the theater lobby?
And empowers agency, but manufactures victimhood.
It's staggering how swapping 3 letters can shift the brain from defense to offense. The next linguistic pairing Roth tackles cuts directly to the core of this victimhood. Have to versus want to.
We constantly frame our daily existence through the lens of coercion. We say, "I have to attend this staff meeting, I have to finish my taxes, I have to pick up the kids."
This phrasing linguistically positions you as a helpless hostage to external demands. It strips you of all autonomy.
Roth forces his students to systematically eradicate "have to" and replace it with "want to." And there's a brilliant confrontation in the book with a student named Oscar who violently rejects this.
Oscar was an engineering grad student who told Roth, "I absolutely do not want to take these advanced math classes. They are brutally hard and boring. If they were not a strict requirement for my master's degree, I would never step foot in that building. I do not want to take them. I have to take them."
But Roth doesn't let him off the hook. He traces the logic up the abstraction ladder.
He asks Oscar a series of binary questions. Do you want a master's degree from Stanford?
Oscar says yes.
Is the university forcing you to attend against your will?
How?
So since you actively want the degree, and you acknowledge that the math class is the required toll to acquire it, then you actively want to take the math class. You have chosen the package deal.
Acknowledging that the friction is a choice you made instantly restores your power. It forces 100% radical ownership. Even the deeply unpleasant chores of life are usually steps on a staircase that we actively chose to climb.
But mechanically, I have to play devil's advocate with an extreme edge case. What about biological imperatives? If someone says, I have to breathe, biology dictates it, the autonomic nervous system demands it, how can you possibly say, I want to breathe?
It sounds absurd, but Roth intentionally uses that exact extreme example to prove the absolute omnipresence of human volition. He argues that, strictly speaking, no, you do not have to breathe. You want to breathe because your highest priority is to remain alive. You possess the physical capacity to hold your breath until you pass out or to walk into the ocean and not come up.
Wow, that is dark, but undeniably logically sound.
It is a stark, intense framing, but it destroys the ultimate excuse. If the continuous drawing of breath into your lungs is an active, ongoing choice that you are making, then your attendance at a Tuesday morning marketing meeting is unequivocally a choice. You are never helpless. You are always choosing.
Which maps flawlessly onto his next semantic pairing. Can't versus won't.
When you say, I can't, you are claiming a lack of physical or intellectual capacity. I can't find the time to exercise. I can't learn this software. It absolves you of blame because you are simply incapable.
Swapping it to I won't find time to exercise is deeply uncomfortable because it forces you to admit volition.
You are admitting that you are prioritizing other activities over your health. It stings to say, but that sting of honesty is the only catalyst for actual behavioral change.
He also distinguishes between the words help and assist, which reveals the hidden power dynamics in our language.
When you offer to help someone, the linguistic undertone implies a savior complex. It positions you as the capable rescuer and the other person as the deficient victim who cannot survive without your intervention. It subtly diminishes them.
Assist, however, implies an alliance between two capable entities. When you assist someone, you are acknowledging their inherent autonomy and simply adding your kinetic energy to theirs. It empowers rather than infantilizes.
This intense, hyper-vigilant mastery over the words we use, this absolute refusal to play the helpless victim, points us toward the final, overarching philosophy of Roth's work.
It is the thread that ties the water bottle experiment, the powdered milk, the lamppost, and the semantic reprogramming all together. It is the state of becoming what he calls the cause in the matter of your own life.
The dichotomy is between living as the cause or living as the effect. The vast majority of humanity lives as the effect. They are the effect of their manager's bad mood, the effect of inflation, the effect of the traffic on Highway 880.
They are passive receivers of circumstance, constantly compiling lists of good reasons why they cannot act.
To become the cause in the matter means embracing the terrifying reality that you are generating your own experience, regardless of the inputs. There's a perfect, quiet little anecdote in the book that encapsulates this paradigm shift.
The train window in China.
Right. Roth is traveling on a long, multi-hour train ride through the Chinese countryside. He is looking forward to seeing the landscape, but the windows of his passenger car are caked in thick, opaque grime. The view is completely ruined.
Now, the standard effect response would be to sit in the seat, grumble about the incompetence of the railway authority, complain to the conductor, and spend the entire journey radiating miserable energy.
Which, mechanically speaking, utilizes static force. It burns emotional energy, creates internal stress, and results in zero displacement of the dirt on the window.
Exactly. Instead, Roth assumes the mantle of the cause. When the train makes a brief stop at a rural station, he doesn't complain. He steps off the train, finds a bucket of water and a rag on the platform, walks down the exterior of the train cars, and physically washes the outside of the windows and his seat himself.
He did not build the train. He did not mandate the maintenance schedule. He did not put the dirt on the glass. But he took absolute, total ownership of his visual experience.
He wanted to see the mountains, so he bypassed the hierarchy of blame and executed the action. He became the cause in the matter.
It is the ultimate manifestation of doing over trying. But to live this way requires us to aggressively deprogram the social conditioning we have absorbed since we were children.
We are conditioned to follow the script. Sit quietly, get the grades, climb the corporate ladder, complain about the weather, and wait for the designated railway employee to clean the glass. We mistake the arbitrary constraints of human society for the unbreakable laws of physics.
We assume the boundaries placed upon us are real. Roth uses a vivid metaphor of a man walking into a town square wrapped in a white bedsheet, speaking absolute gibberish. The town assumes he is insane and locks him in an asylum.
But if, the following week, 20 people march into the square in white sheets speaking the same gibberish, the town assumes it's a new religious sect and lets the first man out.
Our definition of sanity, possibility, and limitation is almost entirely defined by the consensus of the crowd around us.
We are so busy trying to be exact replicas of our mentors, our parents, or the tech billionaires we follow that we blindly climb ladders simply because they were placed in front of us. We rarely stop to use the design thinking process on our own soul.
We never pause to ask the ultimate abstraction ladder question. What is my actual problem statement? What do I actually want?
Which brings up the most haunting analogy in the text, derived from a surreal piece of 1960s British television.
The Prisoner, starring Patrick McGoohan. If you haven't seen it, it is a profound psychedelic metaphor for everything we've discussed today.
In the series, McGoohan plays a former intelligence agent known only as Number 6. He is held captive in a bizarre, utopian-looking coastal village. His captors are a sinister, unseen bureaucracy led by a mysterious figure known as Number 1.
For the entire run of the show, Number 6 is the ultimate rebel. He is fighting the system, trying to escape the village, trying to shatter the constraints, and desperately trying to uncover the identity of the evil Number 1 who is orchestrating his misery.
And in the surreal finale, he finally breaches the inner sanctum. He corners Number 1, pulls the mask off the dictator's face, and looks at the man who has been keeping him trapped all this time.
And he is looking at his own face. He is Number 1. He had imprisoned himself. The entire struggle was an internal conflict projected outward onto the village.
It perfectly echoes the existential observation made by Franz Kafka. Kafka wrote about a prisoner sitting in a cage with iron bars, staring out at the world, mourning his lack of freedom.
But if the prisoner simply bothered to turn his head and look closely at the architecture of his prison, he would realize that the iron bars are spaced yards apart.
He isn't a prisoner at all. He can simply step sideways and walk out at any moment. The prison is not structural. It is entirely cognitive.
We are Number 1. We are the architects of the village. We are the ones building the bars of the cage with our good reasons, our desperate trying, our functional fixedness, and our victim language.
The flat tires, the lost paperwork, the fear of failure, these are all just the bars we construct to avoid the terrifying freedom of walking out onto the open playa and building the serpent mother. Nobody is standing in our way but ourselves.
Which means nobody can set us free but ourselves.
So, as we close this deep dive, let's consolidate the engineering toolkit we've extracted. If you want to finally bridge the agonizing gap between wishing and doing, you must stop trying and start doing.
You must transition from static force to dynamic power. You must ruthlessly identify and discard your good reasons, recognizing them as the comfortable lies they are.
When you hit what looks like a brick wall, you must walk around the lamppost by stepping up the abstraction ladder and reframing your POV.
When you face the paralysis of choice, shoot down your hesitation with the 15-second gun test, trusting your intuition and favoring action over optimization.
When you inevitably fail, throw your hands up, yell "ta-da!" and use the data to iterate. Reprogram your mental syntax. Change your butts to ands, change your half-toss to want-tos, and change your can'ts to won'ts.
Refuse to be the effect. Take total, radical ownership of your reality. Wash your own train windows.
If you are listening to this right now, whether you are commuting in traffic on your own Highway 880, walking the dog, or sitting at a desk you desperately want to leave, understand this. You possess total, unbroken autonomy over what you do the moment this audio ends.
The constraints you feel are almost entirely self-authored. The bars of your cage are yards apart. You can walk through them right now.
To make that reality unavoidable, Roth leaves us with one final, ultimate design thinking exercise, a countdown designed to burn away the bullshit and clarify your true problem statement.
This is the real test.
I want you to imagine, right now, that you have exactly 10 years left to live. What would you immediately change? What projects would you abandon?
Now imagine you only have 10 days left to live. How drastically do your priorities shift? Who do you call?
And finally, imagine you have exactly 10 minutes left. When you reach that final 10 minutes, all the corporate accolades, all the optimized spreadsheets, all the perfectly crafted good reasons dissolve into absolute nothingness. If none of those things matter at the end of the journey, why are you letting them paralyze you right now? Are you going to spend your remaining time polishing the bars of your cage, or are you ready to step through them?